Good morning and welcome to our 5th week in Lent. This week we are going to be talking about our sense of smell and how that informs our life of faith, our ability to meditate, and our understanding of what happened in the life of Christ, why he used opportunities like this to teach about his final days and about our faith life to come. You know, there are certain smells that make memories just come flooding back to us. I'm sure you've had that experience where you smelled as you were driving through a neighborhood a bonfire burning or fresh mown grass in the summertime. That first round of mowing is one of those things that signals that, yes, summer is truly here. Or the smell of deep fried foods remind us of the fairgrounds and the excitement of being on the midway and of being with family or with friends. So smells bring those kinds of memories back to us. Sometimes we're overwhelmed with a sense of a memory that has been triggered by certain smells. I have certain smells that transport me through space and time. The smell of perked coffee, actual perked coffee, reminds me of my Norwegian grandmother very much. She was a diminutive lady, a very small lady, but very powerful in her ideas and her beliefs. And she was a farm woman too, and though she had moved into the little town of Loyal, Wisconsin by the time I was visiting her regularly, she still had all of those habits and behaviors of a really good old-fashioned farm woman. And so she would get up early and she would make this banquet of a breakfast, and she would perk coffee on the stove in an old percolator, and you could hear the sound of the percolator going. And so before we would even get up, start rousting ourselves out of bed, that smell would come wafting up the stairs to where we would stay when we would visit. And my mom and dad would get up and go down and help with all of the preparations for breakfast. And then when we would come down, it was like it just magically happened, but that smell permeated the air. So now whenever I go someplace and I smell that kind of perked coffee, immediately I think of my grandma Amanda. Another smell that's ripe with memories for me is the smell of fresh cut alfalfa hay. I loved growing up on a small farm, and in order for us to have a regular supply of hay for our horses, we had a few acres that we had in alfalfa hay. 2 or 3 times a year, our neighbor, who was a dairy farmer and grew lots of different crops to feed his animals, would come and he would cut our hay. And then my brothers and I and my dad would go out and we would turn the hay by hand after it had been in the sun for a couple of days. And then after that, the farmer would come back and he would bale the hay for us, and we would follow behind in our beat-up old Ford 150. My dad would drive the truck forward, and then he and my brothers would toss the bales of hay up to me, and I would stack them back in the truck. Then we'd take it up to the barn and we'd get it all put away. And so the smell of fresh cut hay has the memories of that work with my family. And while it was hard work, we had a lot of fun doing it. And we knew it was necessary to keep the animals that we loved and cared about fed all winter long. And so that's another one of those memories that comes flooding back to me whenever I'm driving through the countryside and I smell fresh cut hay, but specifically when I smell fresh cut alfalfa hay. So what are some of those memories that come flooding back to you when you smell certain smells? These kind of smells actually have a terminology associated with them. And they are called Proustian memories. So they're memories that are actually captured in the same area of the brain that the sense of smell resides. So it's the smell that triggers the memory. I asked my husband once what were his Proustian memories that were triggered by a sense of smell. And he said the sense of smell of being near a saltwater ocean. He grew up in Australia, and he grew up in a coastal town and would often go fishing with his dad or with some friends. And so that smell of that ocean water brings back those memories of being with his friends and with his parents. I asked a good friend of mine what were some of her Proustian memories. And she said that when the rain hit hot concrete in the summer and you would get that smell, she was an urban dweller, and it made her remember times being out with her childhood friends, and you would hear that or smell that smell, and it wasn't very long before parents were calling their kids home to get out of the rain. So that sense of smell is a really amazing thing. And for any of you who have had COVID and have lost your sense of smell, you're very aware that your whole quality of life has been changed. And even if it's been for a short time, you know what I mean. When I had COVID, when my whole family had COVID, we all lost our sense of smell. And we haven't gotten our sense of smell back, so I'm hoping it will still come back. But what it means is things that were really enjoyable for us, those things are now limited. We don't have that Proustian memory thing going on. I can remember clearly in my brain what the emotion is that's triggered when I would smell perked coffee, but I can't smell perked coffee right now. And so I'm missing out on some of those special memories, and maybe you are too. We're not the only ones, those of us who had COVID. There's lots of reasons why people lose their sense of smell. But it creates a disconnect even from our environment. And so we need to be mindful of that there are certain things that don't connect us with our faith in the same way it had in the past. It doesn't mean we can't remember what it is or appreciate what it is, but to be mindful that it is what it is, right? And we can get over that in lots of different ways. You know, maybe you'll be, to go back to the Wednesday night videos that I've been doing, maybe your sense of smell will be healed. Maybe there's a way to transform your understanding of those events in faith by combining all the rest of your senses, or maybe you can transcend it by saying, I know this is the way it is, but I can still enjoy memories of my grandmother, for example. Even though I can't smell perked coffee, there were other things that she did, and like crocheting. She taught me how to crochet, and I can grab my memories of her through an activity we did together. And so I just wanted to identify that, because many of us in the congregation have had COVID, and I don't know where you are with your sense of smell. So the story that we have for today is the story about Jesus being anointed by a woman. She comes into the area where he and the disciples are staying, and she pours perfume on his feet and wipes them with her hair. Now, all four gospel stories tell about this particular event. And all of those, except for the one related in the Gospel of Luke, take place in Passover week. So this next coming week is going to be Passover week. I think it is in our calendar as well right now. I think Passover starts on the 28th. And so we're kind of right in the middle of that story or coming up on that story. Now, the details between all the Gospels are a little mixed, but I wanted to look at the similarities and the differences of those things. So Matthew and Mark have Jesus stating that the woman will be known for what she did, but they don't mention her name. Only John mentions her name, and he calls her Mary. Now, we don't know which Mary it is. There's lots of Marys in the New Testament. Our traditions have said that it's Mary Magdalene, but we don't know that. It's not particularly identified for us. All of the gospel stories mention that it is in a container of expensive perfume, and Mark and John describe it as being pure nard from Nepal or from the Himalayas. The Gospels of Matthew and Mark state that Jesus' head was anointed. Luke says that the woman wept on his feet and wiped tears with her hair, and then anointed his feet with perfume. And here in John, Mary poured perfume on his feet and then wiped them with her hair. Matthew, Mark, and John all mention that this was done as a foreshadowing of his burial to come. And so it's giving us a sense, because the perfume that was used, and even Jesus mentions this in our story for today, that the perfume that was used was a burial perfume and was very expensive. In each of the stories in the Gospels, the woman who anoints Jesus' feet is chastised. She is seen by the disciples as having wasted something very, very valuable, but Jesus chastises those people for chastising her. So he rebukes them and says that that is not an appropriate thing at this moment in time. Because this is a story that shows how intimately Jesus was connected with that inner circle of disciples. And it's one of honesty. It's a story of deep and abiding love, and what is done in it is an act of love. The fragrance of the perfume not only bathes the feet of Jesus, but it fills the whole room, so that everyone there is going to have one of these Proustian memories of a legacy of the presence of Jesus in their lives. And Jesus understands what is happening here. And he wants that memory to be etched into the spirits of his disciples. So when stuff, money, is brought up and the woman is chastised, he corrects that disciple right away. This is a moment that needs to be remembered, and it needs to be etched into all of their psyches and their souls. What better way to do that than to associate it with a sense of smell? It is in a moment where people who have traveled and worked and suffered together are thinking about what has to happen and what is about to come. And Jesus wants them to know there are times when we do lavish our love in symbolic ways that create memories that will last way beyond the moment itself. And so he says, you'll always have the poor with you. You won't always have me. When stuff, money, valuables become more important than people, we have got our values pretty mixed up. When stuff, when money, when valuables become more important than God, then we are lost. We have to understand our priorities. It's not that the poor didn't matter or don't matter. That is the wrong question in this circumstance. In this circumstance, what's here is what matters most. And it sounds kind of unlike Jesus to sound so harsh, but he's true in this moment. Does it mean that there is no responsibility to care for the poor? No. What it means is that this is a moment for extravagant worship. It's a moment where the people of God have gathered with purity and abandonment, and it's beautiful. This is the moment marked in time by a sense of a smell as the fragrant perfume fills the room. It's a moment marked in time by the sense of sight. Also, as the disciples watch this woman let down her hair, wipe Jesus' feet. It's extraordinary, it's unbelievable, and it is scandalous. And that's why Judas and the disciples were all on the same page at this moment. Judas simply said what they were all thinking. This woman, called Mary, found true treasure, and she marked that treasure for all time in her memory and that of the others, even if they didn't know it just yet. There are some things that I wonder about this story. Like, did Jesus still smell that perfume 6 days later, hanging from his cross, when he had been stripped down and naked with nothing to cover him but the smell of that expensive perfume? And I wonder if that smell brought back memories that sustained him, memories that caused him to cry out, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Of course, none of them knew what they were doing, but Mary had an intuition. Mary seemed to understand that they were in a fight for his life and theirs as well. You know, this is why we do some things in worship, and other traditions do other things in worship that seem a little over the top. And it is because we know that there is something that we are pointing to that is so much more important, so much more holy than what our everyday lives are filled with. Mary anticipated this. She understood. And so she lavished love on Jesus while he was still there with them. I sometimes think about the people who I've loved and who have passed away. The older I get, just like the rest of you, the list is longer and longer and longer, and life is more complicated. And so you don't always get to see the people that you really love and care about before they pass on. And it would be so wonderful to have the opportunity to lavish love on people the way Mary did before they go. To not take people for granted, to slow down, to be in the moment, understand what the signs are, and take those opportunities to do what your heart moves you to do. And the same is true in our relationship with God through Jesus Christ. How lavish have we really been in our love of God? Have we done something that just seems way out there because we're so thankful, we have so much gratitude for the way God has entered into our lives, into our suffering, has healed us, has held us together in moments when we couldn't hold ourselves together. And how do we say thank you for that? How do we put expensive perfume on the way God has been present in our lives? What does that look like? What does it sound like? And what does it smell like? Well, we're getting close to our Holy Week celebrations. We get to gather together next Sunday to worship together. And what will that look like in the midst of our constraints? How can we, even though we have to follow all of the rules of this COVID era right now, how can we in our hearts begin to worship in a lavish way, even though it's different than what we are used to? Because we're not done with our faith, right? We're not done with worshiping Him. We're not done worshiping God together. As a matter of fact, we're starting all over again. So how can we take what our limitations are, take everything that we have understood our relationship with God to be and our relationship with our church to be, and not only heal it, but to transcend everything that's happened so that our worship is again as meaningful as when Mary poured the perfume on Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair.